Cool. So we are now live. Thank you everybody for tuning in to our Facebook Live series as part of Face Equality Week. This session is all about sharing your story to bring about change. So I'm joined by lots of wonderful advocates from around the world who I've had the pleasure of meeting in lots of different settings. I would really like for this session to be an open, honest reflection where we look at what it's like to be an activist, an advocate, someone who shares their story to get behind the Face Equality campaign, to raise awareness, to shape the narrative. This is something that's particularly pertinent to me. This is how I got involved in the campaign myself. And to advocate for the community is an incredibly noble thing to do. But it's important to recognize that we are not a monolith. We don't all have the same experiences or opinions. We might all want the same thing, which is, of course, face equality. And also, we don't want to imply that anyone is less than for not sharing their story. You can get behind the campaign in lots of different ways, because actually it's quite a big responsibility. So we want to use this session to, share the highs and the lows and think about the best way to share your story in an empowering way, and to recognize something that we've been talking about this week is that people with facial differences don't owe you their story, but if they are willing to share it, you might just learn something new. You might just start to see people differently. We are joined by lots of wonderful people from around the world, and I would love to let them introduce themselves. So starting with who is on the top of my screen, I've got Sora first.
Hey there, my name is Sora Irie. I am broadcasting in from Syracuse, New York, which is on the ancestral lands of the Onondaga and Haudenosaunee nations. I am a professional circus artist whose career is currently on hold due to the pandemic. And I'm also a social justice advocate and activist and writer.
Thanks, Sora. Over next to Isabel.
Hi. Hi together, my name is Isabel. I'm from Switzerland. I'm a medical student and I work for a little organization in Switzerland called Hautstigma, and their aim is to support children and adolescents with burn injuries and everything, and support them and like to reduce negative prejudice towards people with visible skin conditions. And yes, when I was 14 years old, I got badly burned at the barbecue, and that's why I have scars. And yes, that's my facial difference. And that's now why I'm here with you all.
And Isabel was actually instrumental in the first ever Face Equality Day back in 2017 with Changing Faces. You were an intern there, and I remember very fondly working with you there.
Yes, already 4 years ago, but it was so much fun and good experience. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, next I've got Jill on my screen.
Hello everyone, hi, I'm Jill Owen and I'm the Head of Campaigns and Communications at Changing Faces. I've been working with Changing Faces for just over a year now, and before that I've got around a decade's experience of working for social justice campaigns. For people based in the States, I've done a lot of work with community organising, which means a lot more to people in the States, and it's kind of a growing movement here in the UK as well. And I guess why I was really keen to be involved with this panel today was really about the power of sharing stories. And I'm very lucky because I get to work with an amazing group of campaigners at Changing Faces, including Hannah and Athol, who are here tonight too.
Thanks, Jill. I've only recently discovered what community organising is after listening to That Was What Obama Did. That's how he got into, yeah, very interesting. Over to Rashira.
Hey everyone, my name is Sher Dobson. I am a researcher, a scholar, and also a disability activist. I was born with golden hair syndrome, which is considered my craniofacial difference. I'm also the owner and the founder of the Dobson Foundation and the Beauty with the Twist brand, which creates spaces of inclusion for women and girls with disabilities. So as a woman of color, as a Black woman with a facial difference, I do a lot of advocacy, grassroots advocacy, community organization like Philadelphia and Gil mentioned here in the United States. I'm currently located in Atlanta, Georgia, which is in the southern region of the US. So I'm really excited to be here and have this amazing conversation and really just amplify, facial difference on a global scale, which is really just amazing because this type of work has not been done before prior to, I think, a few years ago. So just even to have this platform is extremely exciting. So I'm ready to dig into the conversation today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ashira. And over to Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Sheeran-Stevens. I'm a freelance journalist and press officer, and I'm just starting out as a sex educator as well. I have a condition called localized scleroderma, which means that I have like constant kind of evolving scars on my torso and my back. So I've been campaigning with Changing Faces in my spare time for a couple of years now, and I'm really passionate about advocacy of all kinds, and I'm just really excited to be here and have a good chat.
Thank you, Hannah. And finally, Athol.
Hi, my name is Athol Mills. I have a condition called cystic hygroma, which causes cysts to form where you have lymph nodes, and it affected my ear, head, jaw, and neck. And then when they were taking the cysts out when I was born, they severed my facial nerve on the left side, which caused me to develop facial palsy, which is permanent facial paralysis on the left side of my face. And in my spare time, I do a lot of work with Changing Faces on a volunteer basis. And I also do quite a lot on social media, on various different platforms, and just kind of showing my personality really. And apart from that, I'm just a waiter.
Amazing. So I am going to ask a few questions, and I want each of you to feel free to kind of jump in. I will kind of go around each of you and try and give you equal airtime, but really I want this to be an open session where we look at the highs and lows, and we're going to go to Jill at some point to give kind of some of the key principles from an organizational perspective around how to best protect people and how to put kind of systems in place to get the most out of sharing stories in a social change way. I want to go directly back to Athol and just reflect upon a headline that I saw from something that you had done recently, which was, "My facial disfigurement is not the problem, your cruel comments are," which I thought was a brilliant headline, because that sums up the essence of the face equality movement so well, because it's about putting the onus on society and saying that's where the problem is, I'm not the problem. I would love you to kind of tell us a little bit about your experiences working with the media and what that has been like for you.
And yeah, it was just kind of, it's something that I've kind of noticed sort of growing up, is sometimes when you have a visible difference, you kind of do go through that stage of feeling down about yourself and not feeling happy with the way that you look. And I almost felt that sometimes cruel comments that I used to get would kind of hinder that for me and stop me from becoming more confident, because I believed what those kind of people were saying to me. And doing social media, I get a lot of comments about the way that I look and my visible difference. And I'm very lucky now that I am in a very confident stage in my life. If someone says something to me, it just kind of just goes over my head now. Although there was a time where I would be that person that would sit up at 3 a.m. in the morning thinking about what some random person had said to me that they probably won't have even remembered even saying to someone. And I just kind of thought it kind of made me think that no matter what anyone says, your words have weight behind them. And although people like to say, oh, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, that's just not the case in a lot of cases. And that really just kind of drove it home that people really need to take accountability for what they say and how they behave, because your words and actions do have an effect on those people that are around you.
Yeah, that's completely true. And was there a pivotal moment, or was there something in particular that inspired you to want to start sharing your experiences and your story with the world?
Yeah, I mean, I went through like a stage during university where I was literally so scared to even leave my flat because I was just so consumed in my own mind about if someone was going to be staring at me, if someone was going to say something. And I remember taking all this sort of courage in myself and building it up to actually go to university one day. On the train home, it was absolutely packed, and there was these 4 people that were probably around about the same age as me, and one of them sort of pointed at me and was like, "Oh, look at that freak." And I don't think there's ever been a moment in my life where I just kind of wanted the ground to swallow me up more than that. And I remember that I went home after that train journey, which took an extra 20 minutes, which was just not great. And I got home and I cried about it, and I cried. And then I just kind of thought, I've had enough. Like, you are giving these random strangers around you the power of how I feel about myself. And I just kind of thought, no, I put on some Beyonce and I was like, I'm gonna do better now. I'm going to try. And ever since then, I really started implementing. I started sort of posting on social media more. I started uploading YouTube videos talking about how I felt about the way that I looked and different aspects that I'm still working through now. I recently uploaded a video about talking about dating with a visible difference and why I don't do it. And it just kind of, I started getting more and more responses from people sort of saying like, oh, I feel this way too. And it's so great that someone has finally said how I feel. And it kind of just made me want to post even more and share my story. And especially at the start of the year, I did a whole piece about how I felt that wearing a mask has helped stop comments from people, because not that a mask hides my visible difference, but I just don't think people look at you long enough now to kind of register what you look like. And the amount of people that wrote to me and said, I felt the same way, thank you so much for saying this. It's just kind of made me want to do it more and more and more, and keep sharing stories and keep posting about living with a visible difference, because it just kind of seemed to be helping people quite a lot.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. It's getting that feedback from other people to say, wow, gosh, finally I feel seen and I feel heard and I feel like someone gets it. Love that, Ethel. Next I'm going to go over to Rashira, and just maybe tell me a little bit about what inspired you to start sharing your story, to start writing. And I know you do lots of things, you know, work-wise as well, and we've actually got a blog from you that we're going to be posting tomorrow. But yeah, tell me a little bit more about kind of whether there was a key moment for you and what got you into this world.
Well, I first want to echo what Athol was saying about, I loved how you said that it was a stage that you were going through in which, you know, you felt consumed by all those negative thoughts. And then there was another stage in which you came, you're just like, you know what, forget all those other people and what they say, I'm just going to be me. And I know, especially for me, when I do share my story, especially to younger audiences, to parents of kids with disabilities or facial differences, it's really important that us who are older, we echo that it's just a stage. So many times, some of the younger kids and even parents, they get consumed in that stage of thinking that this feeling of being down or this bubble of negativeness, it lasts forever, and it doesn't. I was like, eventually you will get to a point where those thoughts will not, or those things that people say, they won't bother you, they won't consume you, they won't even depress you, because you'll come to a place in yourself that you know, like, despite what people may say about me, despite the comments, I know who I am. And I know for me, getting to that point, before we got on this, before we went live, some of us backstage, we were saying that my first encounter with another individual with a facial difference was when I was 25. And so I went a big chunk, and I'm 29 now. So I went a big chunk of my life being very isolated from the craniofacial community. And so I did have those consuming thoughts where I didn't want people to look at me. I was scared to wear a swimsuit because of all the scars on my body. I didn't like to tell people about my complex medical history because I thought it made me look like a freak or sound like, it didn't make me seem like the typical teenager because I wasn't the typical, teenager. But I had that moment in my life, kind of like what Philida said, in which I pivoted. And I was just like, I can either stay in this mindset of just being scared of the world, ashamed of how I look, embarrassed, or I can embrace that very thing that makes me different, and I can be able to face the world and my life head on. And so that happened around, I would say 24 or 25. It seemed like all these things, it collided. Like the moment that I made the conscious decision to open up was the moment that I was literally introduced to this broader community of people that I had no idea existed. And so for me, storytelling, it goes beyond just telling my story to be seen or to be on the platform, but it's really a way for me to connect from a community that I didn't have growing up. There was no Facial Equality International in the early 90s. There was no, for us in the United States, Children's Craniofacial Association. These things simply did not exist. And so I really, I try to admonish younger audiences, younger people who are going through those nuanced phases of, having low self-esteem and depression. I mean, I went through all of it: low self-esteem, depression, contemplating suicide, like my life worth. You go through those phases, but I really try to encourage sharing the story, because it does plug you into a greater network of support, which essentially helps your mental health, it helps your emotional health, and it gives you a greater sense of well-being and purpose and why you're here on this earth. So yeah.
That's so valuable. And I think I think it's really important to note there what you said about community. And that was definitely something that I had experienced as well. And it's a great privilege that I experienced, that I, after my own accident, was able to just do a quick search online and find an organization and find a community and find someone who could support me. And that isn't necessarily the case in other parts of the world. And I think that validates the mission of Face Equality International, is to spread that message and to actually bring people together in an international way, because things aren't the same outside of the UK, the US, Europe. There aren't necessarily those organizations that bring people together, but actually there are communities online and things are building all of the time. And we really want to enable people to support each other, because like you said, having that support network is everything. Okay, wonderful. I mean, I'm going to jump back to Hannah now, because I know with your media journalism background, you've got both perspectives. You understand what it's like from the, okay, I want to get a story, I want to make sure it's dramatic, at the same time as, okay, this is a real human being. So I would love to understand what inspired you to start putting yourself out there and doing wonderful things.
No, it was. I apologise if you can hear that siren going past my house. It was quite a complicated journey, I think, because I really resonated with everything you just said, Rashira, because I had a similar thing where my condition started when I was a teenager, and I kind of hid away from myself. Like, I stopped looking in the mirror, I stopped wearing anything that would reveal anything, and I think I kind of buried my own story in focusing on other people's. And as much as I loved doing that, I think it was quite difficult as well, kind of being involved in environments where inspiration porn was quite common, and there was a lot of can't say the word, can't speak, sensationalizing stories that became, it was uncomfortable. Even if I didn't have a visible difference, would have been uncomfortable, but having one and seeing the impact that this can have on our community was really, really tough. And I think that's what kind of slowly pushed me to start opening up. And, so I started talking about my experiences on social media. And then I, on a whim, went to this kind of body positive march in the centre of London and met met you, Phillida, and met lots of other people from Changing Faces and lots of other amazing people in the community, and it kind of gave me that push to be like, okay, I can share my story, and there's value in my experiences as well. And I think it's actually made me a better journalist, I think, as well, because having that vulnerability and sharing my own story, I now have an even like more intense understanding of like the trust that someone is placing in you when they're sharing their story with you. And I think it's been, like I said, it's like I think with everyone, you always have the ups and downs of like confidence and then not so confident. But I think it's really nice being in a place at the moment where I just feel very comfortable sharing my story and knowing that, you know, having this amazing community of people that I've met through Changing Faces, and knowing that every time someone shares their story and is honest about their experiences, it helps another person. And I love being able to kind of balance that with my journalism as well and kind of take that role on both sides.
It's the ultimate superpower, I think, having a facial difference. It allows you to connect with people on a deeper level, and like whether that person has a facial difference or not, anyone that's from a potentially marginalized community, anyone that has felt less than or excluded, I think it's such a brilliant tool to actually cut through the bull and actually just connect with people on a human level. And I think, like you said, we need more journalists with personal experience out there, because that would solve a lot of our problems.
Yeah, I mean, as we just had a report coming out, there's diversity in the industry is still struggling a little bit. So the more people like us who are like, you know, disabled people of all different races and genders and like lived experiences, the more of those people we have in spaces like this, the more honest those stories will be and the more accurate they'll be and the more people we can help. So yeah, so more journalists with visible differences would be lovely.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we'll make sure we tag this in the media professionals section of our education hub. Thank you, Hannah, that's fab. I'm going to go over to Isabel now and just ask you, because I know that you are a prolific blogger and you're heavily involved behind the scenes with Hate Stigma, but you kind of do both ends. You do the professional, but at the same time, you are kind of front and center and you put yourself out there a lot. What inspired you to want to start sharing your experiences?
Yeah, first of all, I totally agree to the opinion of Hannah. I think there should be more people with facial difference behind the counter at banks or supermarket or in the TV channels. That would be really nice, like to open it for everyone, to make it to a daily business. Yeah. Yeah, to my story, or what inspired me is like I had an accident when I was 14 years old, and so I also had like a life before the accident and afterwards. And with 14 years, you are an adolescent and kind of finding yourself. And then you have to, I was in a children's hospital, and I have hardly any photos of the beginning of everything, of my scars, because I hated to watch myself in the mirror and everything. But I was really good surrounded by my family, and that made me really strong, and I'm really happy for that. And yeah, when I was in hospital, I remember that there were a lot of other parents with small children, and they always came to me to ask, yeah, how is it for you? Because they couldn't ask their children how it is for them with the pain and everything. And I noticed that I could help the parents, like when I was talking to them and yeah, like telling them how it was for me, and it was very helpful for them. And once another person came to the hospital to visit me, it was a young woman, she also had scars, and it was such a good experience for me to talk to her, and that she showed me, hey, you're not alone here, there are other people in the world, and together we are strong. And that was a step that empowered me. And yeah, all the things made me strong, and that I thought that I have to give it to other people as well. Like if someone wants to have this exchange, I thought it's really helpful. Yeah. And a big step for me was when I changed to a new school 2 years after the accident. And before, I always wear the scar to hide my scars and everything. And then I went to the new school and said, so now you leave the scar at home, because at the new school, everyone will get to know you as you are, and it's good the way as you are. And yeah, that's what I want to give to other people as well. Yeah. And so I was also connected to Haut Stigma. That's an organization connected to the Children's Hospital where I was in, and I helped them a little bit with organizing get-togethers for families and their children with different visible differences. And yes, it was a lot of fun for me, and also kind of therapy for me when I could get some experience back to them. And yeah, also my internship at Changing Faces was such a good experience for me, because I met a lot of people to connect, and so many lovely people. That was empowering for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a wonderful experience, that first Face Equality Day. Yeah, fab. And finally, Sora, someone who I've gotten to know really well recently, and you're just so kind of out there and engaging and just amplifying other people's voices as well at the same time as your own. You're such a good cheerleader. Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to start sharing your story.
Aw, I freaking adore you, Phillida. Thank you for bringing me on. This is so awesome. And just being in community with all of these powerful humans here is just so good for my heart. I forgot at the top, I didn't do visual access. I am a small Japanese American woman. The sides of my head are shaved. I have a long swoop of hair in front that my friend told me makes me look like a friendly comma. And I'm wearing like a little tan jacket and beaded necklace. So I am late to this game. And I've said this before, but like when we talked, what was that, back in December? I'm like fairly late to this game. I'm 37. I am definitely shouting out my age here. And I feel like my entire life, I had been reaching for normal, right? So there's this idea that where I was growing up, where I just wanted to be normal. And I have two very visual things about me that are alien to people. So that's my facial difference, which is the venous and lymphatic malformations on the left side of my face. But also that I'm Japanese. And in America, that is foreign and exotic and annoying. So, these two identities are like very intertwined for me. I like to like play this game called Race or Face, because everybody has this grocery store moment, right? And so for most people with physical differences, the question is like, what happened to you, right? And I get to play the fun game of either what happened to you or where are you from? And that, so these experiences just kind of made me want to disassociate from these identities. So like growing up, my mom, I grew up in the 80s, and my mom didn't have like access to resources, like not like what we have now. And I know faces existed back then, but we didn't have access to it, right? So my mom was just doing the best she could to help me succeed in life. And she's like, just ignore it. If you ignore it, just be yourself and everyone else will too. And I really took that to heart and took that literally. And so like, I just disassociated from the left side of my face, even though it's like so very visible, right? And so I've kind of walked through life like that. And so, and like in 2019, which is when I connected with Rashira at the Faces 50th anniversary in Tennessee, I like just earlier that year, I had started Googling like my craniofacial conditions, because I'm like, I wonder if there's any like medical advancements on this, because when I was growing up, there was like nothing. It's very rare. And so I started Googling that. And as I did, I kind of like fell down the Google rabbit hole and realized there's a community of people out there with physical facial differences. And I was just like, I should know this. I should have known that. Like, that is just like, I am not the only person in the world, but I did not. And so that kind of like got the ball rolling. And then I went down with Rashira to speak at this conference or this fundraiser. And then, you know, things kind of coasted until just this year. And then the pandemic shut everything down. And, you know, my husband and I are both professional circus artists, and we, like, our careers were put on hold. And so then I had nothing but time to think about where I was in life. And the thing is that like, it's really hard to tell a story when you're not really sure what that story is. Right. So in the past, I had always been open to talking about my face, but I just didn't really know how to do so in a way that felt powerful. I would just kind of explain the medical side of it. But I didn't really understand the way I moved through life and the survival mechanisms that I had put in place unconsciously. And I started to realize that this year, like with mask wearing, I realized because my condition affects my left eye, I realized that I lost my ability to smile, which is a survival mechanism for me. So like my survival mechanism is to like walk into a space and smile right away from way back. And then, you know, approach people and be like, I'm friendly, I'm not scary, I'm friendly, right? So, you know, and that kind of made me realize, like, start to realize some of these survival mechanisms. Anyway, so it's this year where I started to get really rooted in my Japanese American history and my family's history here in this country, which is so incredibly complicated. And, you know, also, I read Disability Visibility, which is this amazing book. And now I'm like reading Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice, and like all of these books are bringing me back to myself. And I realized there was an essay called, or not called, but by the Harriet Tubman collection, where it really defined disability for me, where, you know, like I knew facial disfigurements or physical disfigurements or differences are legally considered a disability in the US, but I was like, I don't know how to accept that for myself. I don't know, like, you know, like I feel like an imposter. I feel like I don't fit. How can I fit into this? And the Harriet Tubman collection was like, you know, disability is not a bad word. Disability is an indictment of society and the doors it closes on us. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I felt like I was coming home to myself, and I started to feel like, oh, this is where the power is, right? This is how we reclaim our power. And that is when disability started to make sense for me. And I know that not everyone in this community chooses to claim disability, which is great. We are all autonomous humans. But for me, it really makes sense. And for me, it gave me that power to share my journey and connect with others and to encourage others to share their journey in a way that is safe for them to do so. That was
wow. So much there. And I think you're completely right. I think everybody is entitled to claim whatever language they want to claim, but the community is there should we wish to tap into it. And actually, like you said, disability isn't a bad word, disfigurement isn't a bad word. We are not the problem, society is the problem. And actually recognizing that is the most empowering thing of all. And I think what all of you have kind of spoken about is a sense of purpose. So whether that sense of purpose comes from helping others, whether it comes from a wanting to stick it to the world and find purpose in reshaping things and lobbying and changing legislation. I think all of what you have kind of expressed there is the purpose of sharing your story, and it comes in lots of different forms, and you don't have to put yourself out there in order to bring about change. You can do it in your own way, and I think all of it is about finding a way that feels comfortable and feels empowering and individual to you. So thank you for all sharing what it means to you. And I can see in the comments now just about all those books that you were sharing, and yeah, so wonderful. I would like, yeah, of course, go on, Rashira.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I resonate especially what Sora was saying about you disassociated a lot from your disability identity because you also identified as being Japanese American. And I think a lot of times, especially in our generation, we find difficulties in trying to share our stories or our narratives because there really hasn't been a lot of room for either disabled or you're Japanese American, and those intersectionalities, focusing on even within disability spaces, we still identify with other narratives. And so, you know, just to hear you say that, Sora, and having conversations with you offline, and me and Hannah were kind of talking about it in the chat box, how this narrative of disability identity is really expanding. And so that's also really important that we amplify that as well too.
Yeah, and I would obviously just want to reiterate that your blog tomorrow on intersectionality, I think, is a really, really pertinent one to be talking about right now. Another book to recommend would be Sonia Renee Taylor's The Body Is Not an Apology, which is another great one to talk about intersectionality. Yeah. Okay, I think we should now go over to Jill to share some of the principles. I think we've kind of done the highs, we've done all of the positives. Let's have a few of the, okay, let's protect people, let's do it in the right way. Jill, over to you.
Thank you. It's really lovely to hear everyone. And I think Sora, when you talked about your story is your power, that's how I was like nodding away. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's kind of from like a professional PR person's perspective, but also kind of a campaigner and somebody who works with a group of campaigners. Kind of that is, I think, the key takeaway is that your story has power, and that's really, really important to remember. But it's also really important to remember that it is your story, and it's up to you when you choose to share it and who you share it with, and that it's absolutely acceptable to choose not to share your story or to only decide which bits of your story you want to share that day, because, you know, life's not linear, is it? You know, there are ups and downs, and there'll be times when we just do not want to share certain things. But I think kind of one thing that I think is really good to remember, and this is a quote from Adam Pearson, is basically, remember, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. So if at any point when you're in that process, whether that be talking to a journalist or writing a blog or ready to kind of share something across social media, you can stop and you can say no, and you can decide to do something another time or to put it on the back burner. That's absolutely fine. And I guess the other thing that I think is really important to remember is kind of why you're sharing your story. And this goes back to kind of my community organizing background, is that kind of you share your story for a reason, and to make a difference, and to have that, if it's kind of like it's an exchange, it's a bit of bargaining. Like, if you're going to share your story and share some really intimate and personal details about yourself and your feelings and your life, like, what are you going to get out of it, and why are you going to do that, and what can you ask for in return, and not to be afraid to ask for something in return. So I think it's about having that ready. So here at Changing Faces, when we do campaigns, it's about remembering, okay, what are our asks? What are the 3 key messages that we're going to get across when we share somebody's story, and what are we going to kind of put in there at the end or at the beginning? So, you know, who are we going to ask for, and what and why? Otherwise, I fear that we kind of end up in that situation that Hannah referenced, that kind of this kind of just curiosity about somebody, which isn't helpful. And why should you share your story unless there's kind of that reason for sharing it? And so I think, yeah, my top tips would definitely be thinking about your 3 key messages, and what is it, that you're going to get out of this. What is your ask, and who you're going to pin that ask on? Is it going to be at a politician? Is it going to be at a business? Is it going to be at an individual? And having that ready, and making sure that you've got the skills to weave that into your piece, or into your live interview, or into your pre-record. And I guess thinking about what preparation as well, like preparation is really key, and there's some amazing resources out there that you can use to help you. And I know that that kind of the media and language guidance is available on the Face Equality International hub, and also here in the UK we've got kind of a UK version of that, kind of our language media guidelines as well, because I think that's so important, that if you are going to be speaking to a journalist, to kind of equip them, you know, give them that bit of work to do as well. You know, here are the guidelines, here is what is acceptable to say, and or to tell them, you know, this is how I expect you to refer to me, or my visible difference, or my condition. That you do have the power to call out what language should be used. And then yeah, practice, kind of be really clear about what you want to say. I guess one thing that I would say too is that sometimes it does go wrong, and you can do all that preparation and all that practice, and you talk to the journalist, or you get someone like me to talk to the journalist in advance, and we talk about language guidance, and there's this brilliant piece, but then the headline is terrible, and you think, how on earth did this happen? Like, you know, the journalist got this, the piece is fantastic. And I guess, you know, particularly in print, the news industry works really quickly, and often the person writing the headline is not the journalist who wrote the story, and sometimes there's a breakdown in communication, and it's horrible. It's horrible when that happens, and it's horrible for the individual, and it's horrible for the team who've supported that individual. And that's when we step in, and we have to educate people, and we have to explain why that's incorrect, and we have to write to the editor, and we have to go through that process. But I guess what's really powerful when that does happen is to know that there is a community of support there for you, and other people calling that out, and to know that there is support out there as well if it does happen. And from an organizational perspective as well, it's making sure people are aware of those risks, that could happen, and that you could get negative comments, you know, people posting on a news website or online, and talking through in advance, like, what do you do if that happens? Who do you speak to? Have you got a support network? Like, are you ready, and are you happy to do that? Because it is a risk. Once it's out there, it's out there. So it's about making sure, that we've got those support mechanisms in place. And hopefully we'll see fewer and fewer of those headlines, and that education works, and kind of more and more people see those guidelines. But it's a constant process that we've got to go through. Yeah, I could see Hannah nodding along and kind of in agreement with some of that. So I think that's a good start. I'll stop and see. I'm sure some people will want to leap in with either their experiences or with a question.
Yeah, I think you're right. Preparation is key, and asserting your boundaries, asserting, boundaries aren't just there for media interviews, they're there for how much you want to give away on social media, whether you want to respond to that DM that day or whether you actually want to say, I can't, I don't owe you anything, this is a lot for me, this is traumatizing. I think boundaries are everything, and I think just setting yourself up from the off, because once you're out there, and I think that is a massive decision that you can't take lightly. And I myself had some negative experiences, which was kind of what inspired me to take on a role behind the scenes at Changing Faces, because I was sick of telling my story, but I was still passionate about the cause. And when I entered into this leadership role, I actually started going for counselling, because I knew that I would then have to start giving that bit of myself away again, and I was really, really reluctant to have to do that, and I wanted to prepare myself to do that, and I was very privileged to be able to go and seek that support, because it's a massive undertaking, and it was me, and there's so much of my identity tied up in all of this stuff. It means so much to me, so it's a big thing. So boundaries are everything.
Absolutely. Yes. One thing I would add to that is, and that goes back to preparation, and we talk about that in the kind of the media training that we do with campaigners like Athol and Hannah. It's about thinking about kind of those experiences that will stop people and will kind of stop people in their tracks and make people listen, but also making sure that the experiences that you're ready and kind of able to share that day, and they may change. You might have a kind of like your 3 or 4 experiences that you're ready to share, but yeah, they may change day to day or week to week. But I guess it's about kind of being comfortable with them, and like practicing telling those stories in front of friends or family, or kind of on your own and in front of the mirror, and being kind of ready to share them. But having that really honest kind of discussion with yourself, but also with people around you about what you're able to share that day or week, and not knowing that might need to change, and that's okay.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
Just shout out, Jill, thank you. This is all like wonderful, like really good information about controlling our own narratives. I want to talk a little bit about like what happens afterward, right? Like the comments, like, because you will get flooded with affirmation, but also, like I just had an experience yesterday on one of my posts that I put up on Instagram. Someone came at me with how diversity and inclusion is the new hatred. I was like, oh, okay. And so like, because I did not think my post was controversial at all. I really just thought it was really unexpected. And so like, I still have not answered it because I'm just sitting with it. And, my husband is just like, okay, this person is struggling. I'm like, you're right, this person is struggling. So I'm just gonna like take a step back and not jump in right away, and also like protect myself, because I just don't know. And I feel like as we are sharing our stories as a form of activism, we have to be compassionate with ourselves. And I am still deciding whether I'm going to just delete that comment and ignore it, or whether I'm going to answer. And I've committed to myself that whatever I decide, I'm going to have compassion with myself and tell myself that it's okay, right? So we have to be nice to ourselves on this journey and trust ourselves to make the right decisions that are for us, because if we burn out, then we burn out, and that's one less person in this fight. So we have to like take care. One of my mentors, and I'm going to paraphrase because I promised Phillida I wouldn't cuss on this international forum, but she said, be freaking nice to yourself, right? And it's something that we can all take and just like have compassion with ourselves as we go, and know, in sharing our stories, in doing this work, we're going to make mistakes along the way, and we can have compassion with ourselves, or like say things that we didn't mean or that were misinterpreted or whatever. And we just have to like either accept those things as mistakes and move on and take responsibility, or say, nope, I was misinterpreted, and try to clarify, but just be nice to ourselves so that we can continue on and meet ourselves wherever we are.
So could I add
Go on, Hannah.
wonderful
Jump
things you said. I think just everyone has said, everyone just nodding this entire time. I'm gonna give myself neck ache for tomorrow. But just to add to that, I think like the most important thing I found in sharing my story is to remember that like we're giving little pieces of ourselves away when you're sharing a story, and it's so important to remember that like you need to keep the big pieces for you, and like you can't give away every tiny bit of yourself. Like what's that saying? Like you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. And I think as valuable as it is to share your story, the big pieces, like the soul of that story, still needs to stay in you before you can share the little pieces with everyone else. I hope that makes sense.
You have to protect yourself first. You cannot give back to others unless you are, able, and like you're saying about burnout, there is definitely like activism burnout. That is definitely a thing, because it's exhausting. And when you're so emotionally attached to a cause, when it doesn't go right, or when people don't get it, or you get trolling, or you get people saying, oh, this is just political correctness gone mad, that's like a kick in the stomach. So it's a massive undertaking. So protecting yourself first and being selfish and putting yourself first is so important.
Just remembering that you don't owe anyone anything. I think like, yeah, you don't owe anyone your story. It's like every piece you share is entirely up to you and within your control.
I think as well, sorry if I'm jumping in. Another thing that I would like to add to that as well, when you're sharing your story and stuff, is two things. That no is an answer. A lot of people do kind of have this whole connotation that, oh, I can't say no. You really can. If you don't want to do something, you're well within your right to say no and not do it. And then I think to just echo what I can't remember names because I'm so bad, but someone said something about you will get loads of comments when something goes out, and it's almost to sort of know your own boundaries. If you're not ready for something, it is okay to not do it. You're not passing by on something. And I think because I think there's that sort of inner struggle, whereas if you're not ready for it and then you go and do something and then you're influxed with loads of comments that could be negative, that can kind of hinder your own progress with yourself and kind of set you back. So I think it's more about knowing your own boundaries within yourself as well, because I know that I might be fine now, but if I was sort of back when I was feeling really low about myself, if I'd shared my story and got loads of negative comments back, that would have set me back tenfold. And I'm very lucky that that hasn't really happened since sharing my story. But as well, there'll be loads of people that will try and come along and sort of discredit you, sort of try and put you down, because I've always found, especially with doing social media, that when you share your story and you get a lot of praise for something, you could be the nicest person in the world with the best story. There will always be someone that just will want to say something negative because it's just sort of programmed into them because they are uneducated. And I remember I hit like a milestone on TikTok, and I put a TikTok up sort of celebrating that. And a couple of comments I got were, oh, you've only got that following because of your visible difference. There's nothing else as to the reason as to why you have that following. And I think as well, it's to sort of like prepare yourself and sort of practice self-love is the best thing, because I always feel that once you have an understanding of how you feel about yourself, and if you can sort of sit there and be like, wow, no, I actually know my own self-worth, it kind of then starts to not really matter what other people say about you, and you can kind of process and deal with it better going on. I always like to say that you're born twice in life, when you are first born and then when you discover your own self-worth. It's quite sort of empowering knowing your own self-worth. And if you have never practiced self-love, then honestly, that's like my best advice, is to really start and sort of just be in tune with how you feel about yourself. It's like one of the best things I ever learned to do.
Radical self-love.
I like to echo in that. I kind of want to go back to what you said, Philadelphia, that activism burnout is real, and I went through a lot of that. in 2020 because I felt like I started blogging in 2016, sharing my story, and it's been shared over a plethora of platforms, but I just didn't see that progression like I wanted. I published my first book, and I did all these different things, and I was just like, God, like, this is just, sometimes it still feels like I'm speaking to a brick wall. And so this is something I talk about now a lot in therapy, like just if you, I admonish you, go to therapy. That's what I'm gonna say on that. Go to counseling, it helps. But something my therapist pointed out to me a lot was, especially people like us, we show up in spaces all the time. And because we show up in these spaces where we're having to fight against stigma and microaggressions and all the different nuances, it can be draining and we not even realize. And so my therapist, especially this year, have emphasized me in taking time to self-love and to fill my cup back up. And so I want to say that on that end. And then on the second thing, I think also too, as storytellers, as activists, I think one of the things that our storytelling is not just about us, it's also about the audience who is receiving our story. And I think sometimes we can get caught up, and this is just, my opinion or, whatever, we can get caught up in sharing our story from our perspectives. But I know for me, it has helped for me to mentally break down every audience that I'm speaking to, because like, you are going to come across some journalists or people who are just really ignorant, and they will say ignorant stuff. Like sometimes I posted the other day about, I'm a person of faith. And so I posted from my perspective and how, my relationship with God and different things has enabled me to accept myself. And it was people in my family who took it back to inspiration porn and totally missed the whole message in which I was trying to say, which is, it's not that you see me as being beautiful, because that's not the thing. It's the thing that society doesn't see me as beautiful because the fact that I have a facial difference. And that is a very real stigma and barrier that I have to overcome. And so instead of getting mad, I can't, I have to think about, well, what generation did they grow up with? Because our parents' generation, older people, like discussions like these, like disability and some of the terms and knowledge that we have now about identity, intersectionality, about autonomy, they just did not have those discussions. And so to them, what they say is very well intentioned, even though it can be a little bit harmful. So I think for me as a storyteller, just having in the back of my mind, knowing my audience and knowing how they might respond helps me navigate through some of those situations. And then in spaces where, I'm a researcher, I'm in school, where it's really academic and they can get really technical with terms and having to break down language like, okay, I know you're saying it from a medical model, but I need you to expand your way of thinking and use more terms that are not so restricting, but actually liberating. And so I like to encourage storytellers. Sometimes it's not the odd, or sometimes it's you as a person, as a storytelling, taking the time out to know the different audiences and the spaces in which you're sharing your story and being okay with that feedback. And then not only being okay with that feedback, but even knowing, like kind of as I was saying, despite their response, despite if you've told your story to a room full of people and you just feel like it went completely over their heads, knowing and sticking to your truth. And I think that is the most important thing in any audience or in any aspect of telling your story, knowing your truth and knowing exactly that if it just falls in the ear of one person and their life has changed, I know for me, I've done my job, I've done the purpose of at least my storytelling. So I just kind of want to add that a little bit.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Rashira.
I was going to
go on, Jill.
I was going to dive in, and I kind of had two things I thought would be worth adding in. One is kind of about, as campaigners, like, let's remember to celebrate the wins as well. And some of them might be really small wins on the way to kind of a bigger goal. But I think sometimes because that goal is big and it's hard and we know it's going to be a long time coming, that sometimes we don't stop and celebrate those small wins in as much as we should. And I think that's probably really important in terms of kind of thinking about burnout and feeling that you're kind of telling your story and it's not achieving kind of that end goal. So yeah, really remember to kind of, yeah, let's champion what we're doing. And totally, it means that it's, you know, if we've convinced one person or educated one person, then that is a huge win, and we take that with us because we know that they'll go on and educate another. So it's really powerful. And then I guess one thing that I wanted to kind of talk about as well is kind of like the different ways that you can share your story, and when it is, if you do feel that kind of you're being drawn into a line of questioning about something that you don't want to discuss, and that kind of how tricky it can sometimes feel to say no, particularly in kind of that live interview or kind of in an event where you feel that you're being drawn into something. And Hannah will know all about this as well, but there's something called the bridging technique, which I think is kind of something that everybody should practice before they do any kind of media interviews. And the bridging technique is like this way where you can just it's really powerful. You can just kind of buy yourself a little bit of time to give yourself some headspace, and then take that interview or that kind of that discussion back to where you want it to go. So you can bridge, and you basically, if someone is asking you a question or drawing you down a kind of a line of conversation that you really don't want to go into, you can acknowledge their question and you say, oh yes, that's really interesting that you asked me about this particular thing, and then you throw in this magical word and it's but, and it's like, oh, but I've got this other thing that I wanted to tell you about, which is way more interesting, or but the real reason I'm here today is, and you bring it back to what you want. And that's really interesting because it's your story and you've prepared and you've got your key messages and you know what your asks are. So like really remember that your story is powerful, and that even though they might want to lead you down a different path, you bring them right back to why you're there to share your story and what it is. So I always think, kind of remember that bridging technique and that really powerful word of but. So yeah, acknowledge that question, lovely question. That gives your brain kind of a bit of time to think about that moment of saying but, and then you bring it back to what you want to. And it's kind of, yeah, it's just one of those little tricks that I think is really powerful to remember and try and use.
Yeah. Any other final tips? I'm really conscious of time. I did say we would do an hour and we're already at an hour, but I think what you're all saying will be so valuable and so empowering. So yeah, any other kind of words of wisdom, please do pass them on and share them now.
I think I just had one thing to add from someone who's like a journalist and someone who has a visible difference and shares their story, is to remember that you have the power. If you're the person with the story, that journalist is talking to you for a reason. Like, you are the one who has the power and has the control to determine exactly how that story is going to be approached. And I think there is a tendency in the media industry for people, when they get asked for a comment and things like that, to be so flattered by the idea of being able to share their story that they forget that they are the one in control. And I think there are sadly some journalists who can take advantage of that. So I think that's the thing I would just add, is just remember that you are the one who has all the power, not the journalist, and not the person who's just kind of the vehicle for your story. You're like this, yeah, you are the engine, so the story can't work without you.
I was going to say something really rude then, and then I remembered that we were on the
I don't know what you're going to say, so
anyway, I just wanted to kind of add to that and just say that there are so many different ways that you can tell your story. You can share it on social media, you can share it anonymously, you can share it in a blog, you can write to your local member of parliament or whoever you want to reach out to in the community. It doesn't have to be out there in the public eye, it doesn't have to be in the media. It's so important to do it in lots of different ways, whether it's with an organization or whether it's independently. You have so much choice over how you want to do it. And I just want to make sure that people know that there is no hierarchy of storytelling. Wonderful. Any final comments? I mean, I will just, if everybody's happy to stay on for a little bit longer, I will throw out any questions just to say for anyone watching on Facebook Live now to throw your questions into the comment box and we can hopefully answer them as a group. I'll just keep half an eye on that now. Yes, there aren't any questions as yet, but lots of wonderful comments that people are passing on just to say how, well, one to say they're looking forward to your blog tomorrow, Rashira, and just to say such wise words from everybody. But I can't see any other comments, any questions coming in. So I think I might set you all free. And just say a massive thank you, and obviously keep up the incredible work, and hopefully we can be a resource for people moving forward. I fully see Face Equality International as an organization that can equip people with the tools to get behind these campaigns, to protect yourself, to get involved in activism in the most empowering way. And I think this conversation is just the start of that. There is so much more that we can be doing. And I am so thrilled to be connected with you all because you have such wisdom and such passion for the purpose of sharing your story. So thank you so much for your time and doing what you do. It's a total joy to know all of you. And thank you very much, and happy Face Equality Week. I'm going to go off of live now.